The research starts from a central premise that all leaders, whether in democracies or dictatorships, want to boast of a booming economy. Report author Luis Martinez.
So everyone would always want to paint a rosier picture. The crucial difference is that in a democracy, you have a whole network of checks and balances that restrains this behavior somewhat. And the underlying hypothesis is that when we start looking at undemocratic regimes, these checks and balances start to become largely absent.
So how to measure economic growth when you can't always trust the government numbers? Research shows that satellite images measuring the intensity of electric lights at night are a close proxy for economic activity. A common example is the nighttime view of the Korean peninsula. South Korea is lit up brightly. Just above the capital Seoul lies the border with North Korea, which is mostly black.
As an economy grows, as an economy develops, things get built. Things like infrastructure, street lights, but also homes, but also industries.
Martinez used data from the Washington-based organization Freedom House as a measure of a nation's democracy. He then compared official gross domestic product, or GDP, figures to the economic growth implied by the satellite images of nighttime luminosity.
What I find is that, say, you take two countries, and in these two countries, the nighttime lights grow by the same amount, and it happens that one of them is more democratic than the other. It turns out that that same amount of growth in lights translates into lower reported GDP growth in the more democratic country.
Martinez studied GDP figures and satellite data for 184 countries over 20 years. The pattern was clear. Dictatorships overstate their GDP growth.
When we compare kind of the more stable, credible democracies to the more authoritarian regimes, we're talking about something in the range of 30 to 35%. What that means, for instance, is that if the true growth rate is 1%, the authoritarian regime will report a growth rate of 1.3%.
China's authoritarian leader Xi Jinping was sworn in for another 5-year term last week. Martinez's model suggests Beijing may have overstated GDP growth by a third over the past 2 decades, making its economy far smaller than claimed. China denies manipulating economic figures. The Communist Party reported third-quarter growth figures of 3.9% in October, but the release of the figures was delayed by several days without explanation, coinciding with the Communist Party Congress. Henry Ridgwell for VOA News, London.